Lil Pilates, and in this video we are going to do a few standing exercises to focus on the concept of hip dissociation. This is a concept that will translate really well, kind of supporting the spine with any kind of like hip hinge, picking up stuff off the floor, picking a kid up off the floor, gardening. How can we stabilize the spine while we mobilize, specifically with this video, at the hip joint? A lot of times in Pilates, we're focusing on that theme of stabilizing in one area, mobilizing in another specific area. And in this video, we'll be focusing on hip-specific mobilization, spine stabilization. The first exercise we're going to do is leg pendulum. I have a block on the floor for that. And then we're going to go into some hip hinge work, some bobbing bird and squatting. I have a roller. For either of these props, if you have a thick book, if you have any sort of dowel, so a Swiffer or a mop would work for this. And then we're going to start again with the block, roller to the side. So I'm going to step my right foot onto the block. And if your foot's longer than the block, toes can rest off the edge. I'm going to point through my left toes and bring my hands to my hips. So I'm grounding through my right leg, and I'm using my hands to see where my hip points are in space, making sure I'm not really hiked in one way or the other. So getting as level as I can through here, I'm going to float my left toes. And then you're going to feel that stabilizing leg working pretty hard pretty quickly. And I'm demonstrating on my bad side, which was a bad choice, but we're gonna work with it. So it's good for me, make me stronger on my weaker side. So finding that float, maybe some balance work just to kind of you're coming off a center, muscles of the ankles up into the calf working to keep you balanced here. If the balance is too much, you have that roller or that dowel handy. You could use that. You could also be near a wall. So lots of options to up the ante on balance or step it back a little bit. So as we're standing here and we start to fatigue through the muscles of the leg on the block, we'll usually start to sink into the hip joint. You can see my hip sasses to the side, and the muscles of my leg have to work way less. This is like so much easier to stay here. So I'm going to ground through my foot and engage inner thigh, pelvic floor, muscles of the outer hip to float the pelvis light on my thigh. And we'll do that one more time. Just kind of feel the sassing moment, the hip sinking, and then the gathering up. So keeping that float away from the floor, I'm going to wrap the seatbelt around my low waist, so stabilizing, stable spine. And then my left leg is going to be the mover or the mobilizer. So I'm just trying to move the left thigh bone in the hip, flexion forward, extension back. And I'm thinking about a pretty heavy foot, penduluming forward and back. A lot of stabilizing on the right side, a lot of stabilizing in the core. Holding here for a moment. If this feels really quaddy in the stabilizing leg, soft bend at the knee, get it more into the hip if possible. Then from here, we can play with a couple variations. I'm going for that roller. And we're going to take the leg out to the side and in. So as we go out to the side, I want you to notice if you lead with the toes, try to lead ever so slightly with the heel. Make it more about, again, that back of the hip versus front hip flexors on that other side. And then the last variation we'll talk about, kind of go through here, are some circles out in your abduction. So a few in each direction, mobilizing the thigh in that full range of motion in the hip on the mobilizing side while we stabilize like crazy everywhere else. Whew, go ahead, step on down. Shake out through that leg that was holding you up. If you even need to give a little pat out for that side, you can. All right, the block is going to come out of the way, and it's roller time. So the roller, we're going to bring it along the spine for some feedback. So you're going to bring the tip of the roller, the bottom tip, to your sacrum. So it's not so low that it's behind your butt cheeks. That's going to put the roller out a little too far. I want you to bring it up a little bit so it hits at the bony part of your pelvis. And the back of the ribs are connected and the back of the head. I'm grounding down through the feet evenly. And then from here, I'm going to hinge at my hips. And I'm only going to hinge at the hips as far as I can keep those 3 points of contact. So noticing the moment where maybe the tail wants to tuck under because hamstrings are tight, maybe where the head wants to drop away from the roller, or where the mid and upper back want to round. So keeping those 3 points of contact, maybe we don't go as far. And then engaging the muscles of the legs, we float back up. So that hip hinge, lengthening the hamstrings, keeping the 3 points of contact, and then ground through the feet, engage the back chain of the legs to lift back up. As we go, you might play with a little bend at the knees to help fire through the musculature at the back of the leg. When the legs are straight and we fold forward at the hips, we're asking hamstrings to lengthen a lot, and then engaging that lengthened muscle. It's always harder to engage a muscle when it's on stretch. So knees can be a little soft with that. The other variation, I'm going to switch my arms if you would like to as well. It can be nice to do both sides. One side might feel not accessible to hold the roller, and that's okay. Notice here with one arm overhead if the ribs want to flare. I am guilty of that all the time. So I'm going to try to gather the front ribs in, keep the 3 points of contact, and then we can play with, instead of a hip hinge, more of a squat and lift up. So thinking about sitting back into a chair behind you, keeping those 3 points of contact, again, avoiding the 3 points of contact coming away from the roller, and then lift up. The last variation we're going to play with is a little bit more balance challenge. So we'll float the right leg, left leg is on the ground, and then I'm going to pivot over top of my left leg. It's the same hip hinge we just did. The right leg can reach long or stay bent. And then I'm going to press through the leg. Ooh. Let's do it again. Balance is part of it. It's not always perfect. So let's try it again. This is even my good side. We're going to pivot at the hip. Right leg reaches long. I'm rotating my pelvis over top of my thigh, and then I'm grounding through my leg, engaging the back chain, outer hip to float back up. So again, as I find that pivot, trying to avoid the pelvis rotating. I'm trying to keep my hips square towards the floor. The roller provides a little bit of feedback for if the pelvis is rotating. And then the 3 points of contact stay against the roller as well. Whew, coming all the way up. I'm just going to show you the one side, but please do both. Even yourselves out. Give a little shake out for the side that just did that. Maybe give a little roll for the shoulders. It can feel like a lot through the shoulders to hold on to that roller. If you have a longer dowel, it might feel a lot nicer if you can get your hand a little higher versus having to hold back behind the head. All right, that was our hip fixation and dissociation video. I hope that is helpful and can translate to life and some of the classes that I hope you will join me for. If you found this video helpful, please subscribe. I'd love to have you around here, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye.